People rarely admit how much they respect a Sigma male. They won't say it out loud, they won't show it directly, and they definitely won't give him the validation he quietly earns. Instead, the respect appears in subtle behaviors, shifts in tone, changes in posture, and moments where even the loudest personalities fall silent in his presence. What makes it fascinating is that the Sigma never asks for recognition, yet he receives a level of respect most men chase their entire lives. And the irony is powerful. The less he tries to impress, the more others are affected by his presence. This video exposes the behavioral clues people reveal when they quietly look up to a Sigma male. These aren't dramatic gestures or public displays. They are involuntary reactions, psychological tells that slip through when someone realizes they're dealing with a man who stands on his own center. You'll start seeing these signs everywhere. In conversations, in group dynamics, in how people shift their energy when he walks into a room. Once you recognize them, you'll understand why the Sigma is never ignored. He is simply respected in silence. If you're ready to decode these hidden signals and see the social world with new clarity, make sure you subscribe to UltraWise right now. And before we begin, write "respect" in the comments and tell me, which sign hits closest to your own experience? People lower their voice around him without realizing it, a subconscious sign of respect.
They don't plan it, they don't think about it, they don't consciously decide to shift their tone. It just happens.
The moment he enters a room, conversations soften, volume drops, and the energy recalibrates itself without a single word from him.
People aren't afraid of him. That's not what this is.
It's something deeper, older, instinctive. A silent acknowledgement that they are in the presence of someone who doesn't waste words, someone who listens more than he speaks, someone whose quiet confidence creates an atmosphere that demands awareness.
His presence alone forces people to measure their own.
There's a psychological reason behind this shift. Humans modulate their voices around individuals they perceive as grounded, composed, and internally strong.
Even those who don't know him well sense that he carries himself differently. Steady eyes, calm posture, a mind that isn't racing to impress anyone.
People who operate through noise feel exposed around someone who operates through depth.
So they lower their voice, not out of fear, but out of instinctive respect, as if raising it would be out of place or somehow dishonor the equilibrium he brings.
They sense that he isn't a man who needs to dominate a room. He alters it simply by being present.
This behavior becomes even more visible in moments of conflict or tension. Others may argue, exaggerate, or escalate, but when he walks in, the energy shifts.
People begin choosing their words more carefully, moderating their tone, and recalibrating their emotional frequency to match his.
It's not submission, it's alignment. They recognize someone who won't be shaken, someone who doesn't get pulled into drama, someone who stands firm without saying a thing. This subtle shift exposes a truth people rarely admit. Respect is most powerful when it's unspoken. And around him, it becomes impossible to hide. They pay close attention when he speaks, even if he talks less than everyone else. In every group, there are always voices battling for space, louder, faster, desperate to be heard. Yet his voice, the one that appears the least, carries the farthest. People notice the contrast immediately. He doesn't jump into conversations, doesn't fight for attention, doesn't lace his words with theatrics. He waits. He listens. He dissects the room with a calm that unnerves those who depend on noise to feel important. And because he speaks so rarely, everyone instinctively leans in when he finally does. It's not the volume that captures them, it's the weight. His silence builds anticipation. His restraint builds authority. Others speak to fill gaps. He speaks only when he has something worth saying. That alone separates him. When he finally opens his mouth, people stop scrolling, stop whispering, stop thinking about their own response. They pay attention
because they know he's not contributing noise. He's delivering clarity.
His words come from observation, not impulse, from experience, not ego.
And people feel the difference immediately. It's the same effect as a sudden quiet in a crowded room. Everyone senses significance before they even understand why. Over time, this dynamic becomes consistent. In meetings, his brief insights reframe entire discussions. In social settings, a single sentence from him settles debates. In moments of tension, his calm voice cuts through panic with the precision of a blade. People may not articulate it, but they recognize something rare. He speaks with intention. No filler. No validation seating.
No emotional leakage.
Just truth, delivered with unwavering composure. And that truth shapes the atmosphere far more powerfully than the endless chatter around him.
They listen because his words matter, not because he demands respect, but because he embodies it.
They adjust their behavior in his presence, becoming more thoughtful or self-controlled.
Something subtle happens the moment he steps into a room. The chaos softens, the noise lowers, and people instinctively start choosing their words more carefully.
It's not fear, and it's not intimidation. It's an unconscious recalibration, the way people straighten their posture around someone who carries quiet authority. His presence exposes excess. The loud becomes quieter. The impulsive become measured. The ones who usually dominate conversations begin listening more than talking. They don't even realize they're doing it, but their entire energy shifts to match his controlled, grounded state.
This happens because he doesn't participate in emotional theatrics.
He doesn't reward drama, doesn't react to provocation, and doesn't get pulled into collective moods. When others attempt to overshare or impress, his steady expression reflects none of it back. And when someone tries to manipulate the room, his calm gaze dismantles the performance instantly. Under that silent scrutiny, people feel the urge to correct themselves, to be more real, more careful, more composed. They sense that he sees through the layers they hide behind. They sense that pretending won't work with him. His presence becomes a mirror. It shows people the parts of themselves they normally distract from, the insecure tone they use, the needless exaggerations, the nervous habits, the emotional leakage in their speech. Around him, people instinctively filter all of that out. They slow down. They think before speaking. They choose clarity over noise. They want to appear sharper, more stable, more authentic, not because he demands anything, but because his energy silently requires it.
And in that moment, respect reveals itself not through admiration or compliments, but through the instinct to elevate themselves simply because he is in the room.
They seek his opinion privately, valuing his judgment more than group approval.
In every social circle, there's a moment when the noise fades and someone quietly pulls him aside, not for attention, not for show, but because his perspective carries a level of honesty and clarity they can't get from anyone else. They won't ask him in front of others because his answers aren't designed for performance. He doesn't sugarcoat the truth to gain approval, and he doesn't echo the group's opinions just to blend in. Instead, he gives raw, precise insight that cuts through confusion and ego. And people know this. They know that if they truly want direction, not validation, he's the one they turn to in private, where authenticity matters more than image. This private seeking happens because his judgment isn't reactive, it's observational. While others rush to offer loud opinions, he watches quietly, gathering patterns, motives, and emotional undercurrents. By the time someone asks for his take, he already understands the full landscape, not just what's happening, but why it's happening. And that clarity becomes a kind of rare currency. People trust it because it's not influenced by social pressure or the desire to look intelligent. His advice feels grounded, impartial, and deeply accurate, even when it's not what they hoped to hear. What makes this even more telling is who asks.
It's often the people who appear confident publicly, the assertive ones, the talkers, the decision-makers. They perform strength in groups, but behind closed doors, they want the stability he carries.
They want the truth he sees. And they want the reassurance of someone who evaluates the world without bias or noise. When someone chooses authenticity over applause, when they come to him one-on-one instead of seeking approval from the crowd, it reveals something unmistakable. They respect him not for how he looks or how loudly he speaks, but for the rare clarity of his mind.
They mirror his calm energy, trying to match his emotional steadiness.
When a Sigma enters a room, he doesn't demand attention, yet the atmosphere shifts around him. People who were speaking loudly begin to lower their tone. Those who were nervous or scattered suddenly straighten their posture. Even the ones who pretend not to notice him start to slow their movements without realizing why. His presence works like a quiet reset button. It stabilizes the emotional temperature of the environment. And the most revealing heart? People unconsciously adapt to it. They start mirroring his calm, hoping to match the level of internal control he seems to carry with such natural ease. This mirroring happens because his calm isn't passive, it's intentional. He has mastered his emotional reactions through years of observation, reflection, and internal discipline. He doesn't leak anxiety or insecurity into the atmosphere, which makes others acutely aware of their own. Standing near him exposes the chaos people usually hide beneath humor, noise, or confidence. So instead of escalating their usual energy, they tone it down, not out of intimidation, but out of respect. They want to align with the emotional stability he radiates, as if being near him grants them a temporary sense of order they can't create themselves. And the shift becomes even clearer during moments of tension. While others get louder, more reactive, or more dramatic, he remains grounded. People instinctively copy that posture. They breathe slower. They pause before responding. They try to think instead of exploding. They want to experience, even for a moment, the psychological strength he operates with every day. They don't say it aloud, but their bodies betray the truth. They trust his emotional steadiness more than their own. The fact that people adjust themselves to match him, not the other way around, is one of the strongest, quietest signs of respect he ever receives.
They avoid disrespecting him, even jokingly, because they sense clear boundaries.
People can joke freely with almost anyone, tease a friend, push a coworker's buttons, test someone's patience just to see how they react. But with a Sigma, those same people hesitate.
They choose their words more carefully, measure their tone, and instinctively avoid crossing lines they would casually step over with others.
It's not because he threatens them.
It's not because he demands respect. It's because his boundaries are felt, not spoken. His entire presence communicates a quiet line that says, "This far, no further," and people sense it immediately. This restraint comes from the way he handles himself. A Sigma doesn't respond to disrespect with loud retaliation or dramatic confrontations. Instead, he removes his energy. He steps back. He becomes distant in a way that feels irreversible. People fear that distance far more than any argument or outburst. They know that if they cross a line with him, even slightly, he won't engage, negotiate, or explain why it bothered him. He will simply detach. And once he detaches, access to him tightens like a locked vault. That consequence alone keeps people from testing him. Even those who normally rely on sarcasm or pushing boundaries suddenly straighten up around him. They can feel that his tolerance isn't weakness, and his silence isn't passivity. It's self-respect expressed through composure. The few who misunderstand that quiet strength quickly learn that he doesn't entertain disrespect disguised as humor. He doesn't reward it with laughter, nor does he validate it with irritation. He just withdraws, calmly, permanently. And that possibility alone keeps people hyper-aware of their behavior around him. The result is unmistakable.
He's one of the few individuals people instinctively treat with consistent respect, even when they don't consciously realize why. And it's because he never needs to demand it. He simply embodies it.
They trust him with sensitive information, believing he won't misuse it.
People share things with a Sigma that they've never said out loud before. Confessions, regrets, fears, private frustrations they hide from the rest of the world. What's striking is that he never asks for these disclosures. He doesn't dig, he doesn't pry, and he certainly doesn't position himself as someone who wants to hear secrets. Yet people naturally gravitate toward him when their emotional guard slips. Something about his quiet presence makes them feel safe, as if their words won't be weaponized or repeated. It's a trust earned not through promises, but through consistent emotional restraint. When someone tells him something vulnerable, he doesn't react with shock, judgment, or incompetence. He listens with the same calm he brings into every situation, creating a psychological atmosphere where people feel understood rather than evaluated. And because he doesn't rush to fill the silence with advice or gossip, they realize he isn't storing their secrets for leverage. He simply allows them to exist without pressure. That rare neutrality is what convinces people their truth is secure with him. Not because he said so, but because he has shown it through his character. Over time, this becomes a pattern he never intends to create. People return to him again and again, not for solutions, but for sanctuary. They know he doesn't trade information for social currency. They know he won't twist their vulnerability to gain advantage or sympathy. And they know he won't betray them the moment it becomes convenient. His silence is not only a boundary, it is a vault. A vault they sense instinctively, even if they can't explain it. This unspoken trust is one of the strongest signs of true respect. People confide in him because they recognize a man who doesn't misuse words, doesn't exploit weakness, and doesn't play the social games that most rely on. They trust him because his integrity is not loud, it's lived.
They watch his actions closely, using him as a silent standard to measure themselves. People may not admit it out loud, but when a Sigma enters their environment, a workplace, a social circle, even a family dynamic, the atmosphere subtly shifts. They begin observing him the way one studies a compass, not because he demands attention, but because his consistency exposes where they waver. He becomes a quiet benchmark, a living example of someone who does not bend for approval, rush for validation, or compromise his values to fit in. And suddenly, their own choices, habits, and reactions feel louder in comparison. Without speaking a word, he forces introspection simply by being himself. They notice how he moves through conflict with emotional control while others unravel, how he makes decisions without seeking reassurance, how he values his time and protects his energy with disciplined boundaries. These behaviors challenge them. They start reconsidering the moments when they hesitated, people-pleased, or shrank themselves to avoid friction. They watch how he operates as his own moral and psychological center, and part of them feels exposed, because they realize how much of their identity depends on external feedback, something he simply does not need. Even his silence becomes a standard. When he doesn't over-explain, they realize how much they overshare. When he doesn't chase attention, they realize how much they crave it. When he doesn't compete for dominance, they recognize how often they perform for invisible audiences. And in this comparison, he becomes a mirror that forces them to confront their own inconsistencies. Not because he tries to teach them, but because the integrity of his behavior quietly contradicts theirs. What makes this dynamic so powerful is that he never positions himself as a leader or model. People elevate him to that role on their own, drawn to the equilibrium he carries effortlessly. They watch him because he represents a version of themselves they haven't mastered yet, self-directed, unbothered, principled, and internally centered. In a world full of noise, he is a controlled frequency, and without realizing it, they begin tuning themselves to match it. In a world where most people talk loudly just to be heard, the Sigma male proves something far more powerful. Influence doesn't come from volume, it comes from presence.
If you found yourself replaying these signs, questioning how others see you or how you show up in their world,
that's the point. Growth begins the moment awareness hits.
And if you're here, it means you're already on that path.
If you want more insights that cut deeper, challenge your thinking, and sharpen your psychology, make sure you subscribe to Ultra Wise. We don't do surface level here. We go into the mechanisms, the patterns, the hidden truths behind human behavior. Before you go, drop one word in the comments.
Awareness.
And here's the question to spark real engagement. Which sign did you recognize in yourself or in someone you've met without noticing it before? Your answer might reveal more about you than you think.